The deadly drone attack on U.S. service members in the Middle East last week provides a stark reminder that Iran, who backed this and other attacks by proxy terrorist groups throughout the region, receives much of its funding from selling oil to, guess who? The Chinese Communist Party. In addition to purchasing Iranian oil, the Chinese Communist Party stands as a banker and supplier for Russia's war on Ukraine, and leads an axis of rogue authoritarians that include terrorists of Hamas. Now, earlier today, the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party held a hearing to investigate the CCP's support for America's adversaries. And we've seen legislation introduced in the Senate to hold China and Iran accountable for ties to terrorist groups. Joining me now to discuss this is Senator Kevin Cramer, who co-introduced this legislation. He serves on 4 Senate committees, including the Senate Armed Services Committee and the Senate Banking Committee. He represents the state of North Dakota. Senator Cramer, welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to see you.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity, Tony.
So a deadly attack on U.S. service members funded by Iran, who skirts Western sanctions by selling oil to China. And we want to play friendly with China.
Well, exactly right. Not to mention play friendly with Iran. I mean, the fact that they're able to sell Iranian oil to China, kind of on the black market, Tony. They do this thing where they sell to these we're called teapot refineries, which are sort of off the grid, but not really off the grid. And we look the other way. This is all part of, like you said, playing nice. But we're playing nice with 2 enemies when we should be sanctioning that oil like Donald Trump did. We should be protecting that oil from even getting to China. We need to be much more assertive about our economic sanctions, oil sanctions, the trade between these enemy countries, and make it darn hard on them to collaborate with one another and to fund their terror. And at the same time, Tony, places like North Dakota and Texas and Oklahoma and a whole bunch of other places, Alaska, have plenty of clean oil that is produced by good people, free people, that they're happy to sell around the world and not fund terrorism with it.
An extremely important point, because that puts Americans to work with good-paying jobs. I worked in the oil field for a while. Louisiana is well known for its work in the oil business.
It is ever.
So, I mean, Senator, let me ask you this question, because right now there is a bill in the Senate. There's this debate over border provisions being in this supplemental spending bill that would provide funding for Ukraine. But if you step back and you connect all the dots, here we are wanting Americans to pony up with more tax dollars to fund a war in Ukraine that in many ways we're facilitating by not cracking down on the people who are funding Russia.
No, so you're so right on point. The peaceful tools of energy development, the peaceful tools of using our strong dollar and banking system, sanctions, the peaceful tool of alliances could have prevented a lot of this stuff. Let's not forget, it was the weakness and is the weakness that Donald Trump projects, like with the Afghan withdrawal, obviously, as I said, playing footsie with Iran as soon as he gets into power. None of these weaknesses de-escalate anything. It just empowers, emboldens our enemies, so they start using weapons. I mean, Vladimir Putin on day one used natural gas as a weapon in the war against Ukraine. I talked to the president about it beforehand, saying, do not green light the Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline. It gives him a weapon. And of course, I lost that fight, and now we're at war. So you're right. There are lots of economic and geopolitical advantages the United States has if we just use those tools. But our problem, Tony, is there are so many people on the left that would rather export their what they consider climate guilt to polluting countries than take advantage of the fact that we do it better than anybody.
Well, and again, I'm looking, and I know as you do, the average American family, instead of having to pay more of their, inflation eaten up income, they could have good paying jobs when we're developing our energy sector like we did, 3 years ago when we were an exporter of energy.
And not only that, Tony, but when we're producing more, global prices come down. I mean, so it's that, there's even that advantage that the input cost in our gas tanks here at home actually goes down because we're producing more to sell to other countries. So again, trade is a lot better tool. Now that said, there's a war, an unjust war, where Vladimir Putin and Russia has attacked our friends Ukraine, and we've had to we put some resources toward that, of course, understandably. And I think we could do some more, but I think we've got to be more honest with the American public. I don't think we should be funding their government. I don't think we should be funding, even humanitarian aid. I think that's largely a European responsibility. I'd rather have Ukraine fighting and diminishing the Putin military than our boys and girls doing it, obviously.
Right.
But here we find ourselves in all these squabbles around the world, all because we project weakness in the first place, Tony. All of it's preventable.
Right. And exactly the point. It's fine. We want to help out those who are fighting for freedom. No question about it. But our policy has to be consistent so that we're not aiding the very enemies that we're fighting proxies from. And that's what we have with Iran, and that's what we have with Russia. I mean, and I would go a step further, and I know you're very tough on China, tracking this very closely, but many U.S. companies are investing in Chinese technology, and they're aiding the CCP.
Tony, the fact that we haven't learned this lesson yet is shame on us. I mean, decades ago when we let China into WTO and gave them favored nation status, okay, that happened with the hope that they become more like us. Well, all they've done is exploited us with that, our own weakness. But the fact that Wall Street and our own corporate citizens are still drawn to that incredible market because they love the cash more than anything, or the fact that we still import cheap stuff from China that is made with slave labor in some cases, certainly unfair labor, certainly unfair conditions, certainly much more polluting factories, all so that we become dependent on them. The fact that we still allow it at all is mind-numbing to me, and we've got to do a lot more.
And my concern is that as we facilitate that, we're going to see more countries taking a similar approach. I'm very concerned about India and what we see happening there because we're rewarding it with trade and with investments. Now, you have legislation that you've introduced to hold China and Iran accountable. We just have a couple minutes left. Tell us about that legislation.
Well, so a lot of this focuses on the very things you and I are talking about, holding them accountable by putting the sanctions on, putting secondary sanctions on. I think we need to do a better job of defending ourselves in some respects as well. I mean, I've had this legislation that some are calling a carbon tax when it's exactly the opposite. It prohibits a carbon tax, but it allows us to define in our terms our exceptionalism and use our exceptionalism in manufacturing as a defensive tool to say even to our friends, our trading partners in Europe, you can't tax us any more than we're already taxing ourselves with our environmental compliance laws and regulations. And if you do, here's the data to demonstrate that we're the cleanest in the world. We just need to get a lot more aggressive with our trade policy. Donald Trump has always had it right when he says America first, America first, America first. That's not America only, but we should be doing geopolitics and international trade based on our terms as the largest economy in the world, not on everybody else's terms.
Great point. Senator, got like 20 seconds left. Will we see a supplemental budget and border provision emerge from the Senate this week?
Well, every week we say next week, right? I'm not sure, Tony. We'll know more after tomorrow to see how far they've come and how much agreement there is. The biggest challenge we have, of course, is even if we got something that got, say, 70, 75 votes here in the Senate, the House is going to be really, really tough. So we're going to have a lot of time to review the legislation once we actually have text. That's, as you know, been a frustration, understandably, for a lot of people. And it's not the kind of thing you can have, turn around in 24 or 48 hours and be fair to the American people. But it's possible, it's doable, but
not likely.
Not likely in my view. All
right. Senator Cramer, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Always my pleasure. Thanks, Tony.